Welcome to the Investor Coaching Show. Here's your host, Paul Winkler.
And welcome. This is the Investor Coaching Show, and I am Paul Winkler. Along with in here with me, Mr. Ira Work. Man, ready?
It's a wet and dreary day. Good place to be sitting right here.
Yeah, and a Super Bowl tomorrow.
Super Bowl tomorrow.
And did you know, I saw this, my wife said, I don't know if I believe that 1 in 4 Americans bet on the Super Bowl. That, they said 25% on CNBC. I was floored. You know, so that explains a lot when it comes to investing, how people approach investing, right?
Yes, it does.
Because we talk about active stock picking, market timing, Bitcoin, energy stocks, real estate investment trusts, whatever. And, you know, trying to figure out where things are going to go and pulling money out and tactical asset allocation. But it's interesting that, you know, some of these sports betting things are not legal in Nevada because they want to make sure that you go to the casinos instead.
But
you know, is that right, Leviticus? Am I right about that?
You're right. You're right.
That's
But you know what I find very funny is when I listen to the commercials on the radio and they talk about the sports betting, like Sports King or
got a gambling problem,
whatever. Well, not only that,
that's
but
what they always have the tagline.
Like, only able to do this in Tennessee. Like, if I'm living in Tennessee and I sign up for the Tennessee one, how do they know I'm not calling in a bet if I'm in New York or if I'm in Florida? Like, I'm only allowed to do this in Tennessee.
I don't know. I don't want to think that deeply today. That's just not where I'm at.
But you know what?
Leviticus, when did they change the microphones in here? These
About 2 months ago. Well,
in fact,
2 months ago.
All right. Because we're actually at the station. We do this between my office where we have a station and we at the station.
You like the mics?
I like
the
them.
mics are really cool.
I like RE320s. I mean, they sound great. Yeah. Okay. Because I think that's what I've got about.
But you know, I like that thing about at the very end of the commercial where they're telling you, you know, we'll credit you $200 if you lose that you have to use within 10 days.
Right.
Right. But you have to use it there.
Well, why do you think they do that, Ira?
So that you just keep betting. But then they have this
going.
Big
That's right.
You know what? But then they have this disclaimer that says, and if you have a gambling problem, call 1-800. Don't gamble anymore.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like that little saying. It's kind of like that little saying on the prospectus. You know, past performance is no guarantee of future results.
As long as you have the disclosure, you're good, right?
Know? Yeah.
Yeah, because we're all cool.
So what is MGM? MGM is a hotel or a casino.
Yeah, if you go to MGM, yeah.
So they have commercials as well, too.
Right.
Bet MGM. When you're doing the sports, I'm like,
right.
So I guess you got to get hooked up with a hotel casino in Nevada to...
I don't know. But you know my story about, you know, when I was in college, I was so big on gambling that I would go to Atlantic City all the time. Why? Why? Because I had a friend of mine that lived there.
Oh.
Yeah, okay. You knew there was a punchline. So I had a friend that lived there, and I would play. Okay, so I did music to try to make my way through college, and I played the resorts in the Catskill Mountains, and I would go down and I would pick up a bus after playing in the Catskills, and then I would go to Atlantic City, and I was broke. I mean, I made money from playing music, but not enough to really, you know, that gets expensive.
Not enough to lose in the casino.
Well, they give you tokens when you get there, hoping that you would start gambling. And then what I would do is I'd walk in there, I'd pick up my tokens, and I'd wander around the casino, not doing anything. And then I'd walk back in there and I would say, you know, just can you give me cash in exchange for this? And that's how I paid for my bus ticket.
Smart.
So I was just I'm good at math. I'm not doing
it. You ate a free buffet?
No, I'm not that guy.
Oh, okay.
We would have people when I was playing in the resorts in New York. The people would come from the city, Long Island. They would come from the city and they would come up just for the free food at the resorts and watch the band. They would leave. And it was just, I always thought that was so odd.
So you wouldn't know if the food was any good or not?
No, I have no clue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had no clue. I was there just go hang out with my friend from college and just try to see if I could game this system and get free bus rides.
Well, that would actually be
it was great.
Kind of great to get food from a casino, especially as a college student.
I don't.
We're always hungry.
That is true. That is true. Okay, so on to investing types of things. Okay, so I got a question, and if you got a question, you can shoot that question to paulwinkler.com/question, or go to the website paulwinkler.com. Somewhere on there, there's an area where you can put, you can stick a question in there. But I got this really cool question. Stan actually sent this question, and I really, really liked it. So I thought, I'll start off the show with that. Paul, really enjoy your show. Listen to everyone. Never worry about what tomorrow may bring. That's it. My philosophy is the more you educate people, the less they worry. We fear that which we don't understand, as I always say. My question, heard it said that 70% of people will eventually need long-term care. I wonder if the data may be not accurate for successful investors. I'm thinking that wealthy people will probably be in better health condition, not alcoholic, not a smoker, not on drugs. Wealthy people would have better access. I guess that's some people, I suppose. We're excluding Hollywood. Anyway, no, sorry, that wasn't nice. Wealthy people would have better access to health care. Do you know what percentage of wealthy people in long-term care there is? Maybe you could see how many of your clients have had long-term care. It's not that big of a percentage. I don't know the number on that particularly. But he says, personally, I love this. Personally, I will not get long-term care. He's talking about the insurance. But I will use my investments to be the motivation for my children to keep me at home.
That's
hey,
really
guys,
good.
this is really funny. Hey, kids, guess what? Dad needs some long-term care, and it's like $8,000 a month or, $6,000 a month. And by the way, I'm going to be paying with your money because eventually he's going to be
your inheritance.
Your inheritance is going to. He says that's what my mother-in-law did, and it was very effective, he says. So to answer that, we actually have a crack. These guys in my office, Scott, in particular, Collins actually did some research on this for me. I said, hey, buddy, go do some research on this. So my crack research staff, this being Scott in this particular case, went and did some work on this. And what he found was fascinating. Because typically my normal answer, as Stan would know, having listened many times, is I'm really torn on long-term care insurance because the problem has been the premiums increasing. It's guaranteed renewable, which means they have to renew you, but they can increase the premium. And we've been seeing significant increases in premium on those policies over the years, and such that it's become unaffordable for some people. Mm-hmm. And, what we've done is sometimes when I say, if you're going to have it, shorten the benefit period, maybe that might be something that you do instead of you don't even find lifetime policies anymore, but, it's shorten the benefit period, maybe a couple of years, 3 years, something like that. Lengthen the elimination period, how long before benefits are payable. And, and then the other thing that I've talked about is, I have a client that's concierge doc, and he and I got into a conversation about this, runs a lot of nursing homes, and he made a point that if you take care of yourself, he just talked about in decent eating, decent taking care of your body, exercising, walking, whatever, he says you typically square the curve and you don't last that long in a nursing home, quite frankly. And you have a better quality of life until you get to that point of death, and that's his point. And, well, this one goes a little bit even deeper, though. This is really interesting. The study was from ASPE Research, and they said that older adults with health problems tend to have less wealth than healthier older adults. They said the wealth tends to fall when people develop health problems, as you'd expect, because you're having to spend your money on health care, right? And he says one study, for example, found that over a 9-year median, household wealth grew by 20% for married people ages 70 or older who did not receive nursing home care. As you'd expect, their wealth grew because they didn't spend everything that was coming in. As far as their investments, they weren't spending it down because people tend to be a little hesitant to spend money that they've spent a lifetime accumulating. But if they were 70 and older, and they did, it fell 21% for their counterparts. Yeah, if they went into a nursing home. For single people who received nursing home care, median household wealth fell 74%. And, so if people didn't have a lot of assets, and you think about why would that be? Well, a lot of people just don't have a lot of assets. So literally many of them might be only living on Social Security. But just to go a little bit deeper, because this really gets interesting. He says inadequate reimbursement rates may make residential care communities reluctant to admit Medicaid beneficiaries. Now, why that's important is for those people out there that are saying, I want to qualify, I want to spend down my assets, set up a trust to spend down my money so I can qualify for Medicaid, which is basically welfare, you could be looking at a problem. Because when you do that, you set up your assets in such a way that you can't use them for your own care in retirement. You end up in the government system for Medicaid for poor people. And they're basically saying here that, a lot of times they're really loath to admit these people because the reimbursement rates are so low. And that's when we talk about big government healthcare, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Ira?
Yep.
I mean, it's that's the problem with it, is that when you don't have high reimbursement rates and you have a private contractor providing that healthcare, you got a problem on your hands. So he says, if we look at LTSS, which is long-term services and support. So that's LTSS, long-term services and support. So you think about money coming in to pay for long-term care. He says it was projected that 69% of adults turning 65 in 2005 would need. But that's where the 70% came from that he was talking about in his question. Would need LTSS, long-term services, before they died. And you look at that number and go, wow, that's pretty high. So what is it that qualifies somebody for needing that help? And you'll typically hear activities of daily living is what's talked about. So it's bathing, dressing, getting up and down. You might have preparing meals.
Eating.
Yeah, exactly. Toileting, transference, those types of terms that you hear. Yes, exactly. Taking medication might be something that they may have a problem with and they need help with. So when they started digging down in the numbers, they said that their results in their study, they found that 70% of adults who survive to age 65 develop severe LTSS needs before they die, and 48% receive some paid care over their lifetime. So about a half people receive some paid care. Now it says many older people with severe long-term needs, long-term services and supports, needs rely exclusively on family. And that's what I find a lot of times, where family help out. Let's say that if somebody is married, typically they wait longer to go into a facility if they have a spouse that's helping take care of things at home. Now it says only 24%, and it says, and here's the thing, here's the key, is that most of the paid care episodes are relatively short. And this is something I've talked about before. Only 24% of older adults receive more than 2 years of paid LTSS care. And I'm going to get to your question in just a second, because it's are wealthy people less likely to need the care, was his question. So we'll get into that. Only 15% spend more than 2 years in a nursing home. Only 15%. So you look at that and go, wow, it's only 2 years. It's not as much time that people spend in nursing homes as you might think. Now, there are some people, and I'll get into that spend longer periods of time. Now, it says the lifetime risk of receiving paid care is not evenly distributed across the population. And this is Stan's question. It's not evenly distributed. I said severe LTSS needs and the receipt of paid LTSS increases, long-term care, increases with age and are relatively common women, people of color, older adults with limited education. So right there you've had the first hint that there are some people that are more affected than others. And it says we estimate that 28% of older adults who do not graduate from high school had severe LTSS needs in 2014, compared to only 9% of those with a bachelor's degree. So number one, they said a little bit of education, you have a difference right there. We estimate that 75% of 65-year-old women develop severe LTSS needs before they die, compared to 64% of the male counterparts. So, what happens when people live longer, you find that actually because you're living longer, there may be a higher need for care, but again, it's much shorter because you're living longer. Now, it says that it's relatively short. It says only about 15% of older adults receive more than 2 years of nursing home care. So you look at it, and it's a fairly short period of time. So what happens is, they only had like 3% of people that needed long-term care services for more than 6 years. So very, very small. Paid LTSS lasts about 1.2 years overall, and they had this subset. That was about it. And then 1.6 years among people. So it's fairly short. But here's where the rubber meets the road and where it gets really interesting. The duration of the long-term care needs differs significantly among groups, with people of color, especially non-Hispanic blacks, and people with limited financial resources before developing disabilities experiencing much longer spells than other people. For example, 43% of those without any financial wealth, 43% of them, have severe needs, long-term care needs for more than 2 years. It's pretty high, compared to 28% with those with 100,000. So they didn't really have a really high bar. 100,000 is what they were talking about in this study. 15%. So, just to break down the numbers, 4 in 10 people with no money, 40%, about just around 40% with no money have severe long-term care service and supports. 3 in 10 with over 100,000, and only 15% they go longer with $100,000, go longer than 6 years. So it's very small. The broke person, that's the broke person number right there. That they only 15 in 100. If they have over 100,000, then it's only 3 in 100 people that have a long-term care episode that goes past 6 years. Now, what they also found out, which was interesting, is that when you're looking at people with these needs, they said people with little income or wealth before developing long-term care needs are much more likely to receive some paid long-term care services by 85. And so because typically what happens is they decline slowly, and health declines slowly because they're maybe smoking, maybe, weight problems, maybe whatever, health issues. So what happens is that those people are in more need. People with less income and wealth before they become disabled are more likely to spend more than 2 years in a nursing home than people with more income and wealth. So, Stan, yeah, your thought process is right. You typically, the higher income, more educated people do not need long-term care as often or for as long, for whatever reason. So 23% of adults with no more than $5,000 in non-housing wealth receive at least 90 days of Medicaid-financed nursing home care, compared to only 3% of people with more than $200,000. That's just 3%. That right there is really important. In other words, only 3% of people that have at least $200,000 saved for retirement will actually end up needing any kind of help with Medicaid whatsoever or welfare. That's a fairly low number, and it's a fairly low bar that they're having right there at 200,000. For a lot of people that they've got a lot more than that saved for retirement. People that have actually done some prep for retirement and actually sat down and had gone through a planning process, they typically have well more than that. And even if you only have that amount, 200,000, it's only 3%. So this is a real reason, if we think about it, why do we build wealth? We build wealth, number one, not to end up in a long-term care facility. If you pay for it yourself, the quality of care is going to be likely much better than if the government is paying for it. And the other thing is that I hear from people all the time, Ira, you can chime in, is that a lot of times what people do is they don't want to be a burden to the next generation. And that's why they prep.
Oh, yeah, my mother is one who has said to us, just put me in a home. Just put me in a home. She doesn't want us to take care of her. And thinking of the statistic where...
But she has the assets to pay for.
She's got 2 sons.
Okay, all right.
She does not have the assets.
She doesn't have the assets. Okay, that's why I didn't know. I knew nothing about her.
She would be one that, on the financial side of it, would be a recipient of the long-term care.
Okay.
From the number sense.
But she has sons that are,
right. My brother and I would see to it that she's not in a Medicaid facility.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And that's the part about the family in this research.
Right. But thinking about a higher percentage of women needing long-term care help. That to me does make sense because, like, I think about my aunt, my uncle, who are millionaires.
Mm-hmm.
They took out a policy on my aunt for long-term care, with the thought being my aunt could take care of my uncle in the event he gets sick and needs to be taken care of, but that he would not be able to take care of her.
Right.
So,
and I was thinking about that very thing as I was looking at this study as well.
Yeah. So they got a policy on her, and they could well afford the policy. When clients ask me about, well, do I need long-term care insurance? I'm like, well, as a need, you have to realize one way or another, it's going to be paid for. You know, you're either self-insuring if you don't have a policy and you're paying for it out of your own assets. And, you know, if your family's taking care of you, your family's taking care of you, but there is a cost to that as well. You know, if you have to bring in nurses like throughout the day, that could actually be more expensive than actually going into a facility. The wealthy people don't need it.
And that's why facilities exist.
Right.
But I think it's interesting that maybe if somebody is a little bit more prepared, higher education, has assets, they don't typically even need it as much. And I think that's the point of this research. And why is that? It goes back to what my client that runs the nursing home says, square the curve. You take better care of yourself. I think that's a big deal. But, you know, bottom line, we got to run to a break, is, you know, thinking about long-term care, I'm not against using it. I typically, if I recommend it, it's shorter benefit periods just to make sure that you take care of that little thing. If you look at who typically buys long-term care, the study shows it tends to be wealthier people egged on by their kids who want to make sure that they get a bigger inheritance, which I think is kind of funny. But I like Stan's idea. You know, just tell them I'm not going to buy long-term care and, you know, you're going to have to take care of me or you're going to end up losing. You know, there you go. Hire your kids. So let's see. Ira, what do you got?
Well, I met with somebody yesterday, and we were talking about their future plan for retiring in 2 to 3 years from now. And it's a government worker, money in the TSP.
Okay.
So we started talking about the TSP, and she recently moved to a 2030 fund. She had she was trying to pick and choose her own funds, and
their life. It's L 2030 is what it is if you're in the TSP.
Right. And but she was, you know, trying to juggle. Before she went into this about 2 or 3 years ago, she was juggling between the different funds and moving around. So she was using some market timing in order to try to get the best returns. And as she started getting closer and closer to retirement, she says, you know what? She's going to probably plan to retire probably at the end of 2025 or sometime in 2026. So the person that she spoke to that helps them with the TSP said, well, you should just go into the 2030 fund. So she went through my workshop that we do, you know, dismantling the myths, and we talked about different asset categories and so forth. And we talked about the TSP, the only one real redeeming quality of it as I see it.
This is Thrift Savings Plans for those you don't know what TSP stands for.
That is the very, very low expense ratio. And the fact that it is, you know, more of the type of fund we would recommend because they're using index funds in that. We don't particularly care for index funds for a whole different reason. But the cost being very, very, very low, and I try to explain that, well, part of the reason why it's very, very low is, you know, they're managing billions of dollars, and Blackstone, who manages that fund,
cap weighting it, which is really, really simple. There's nothing to it. There's no thought that has to go into that portfolio.
So in looking more deeply at the funds, and I've had a lot of clients in this, but I've never looked to it to the degree to find out that when it hits that 2030 or 2025.
How much in bonds that they have?
Oh my gosh.
It's insane, isn't it?
It all transfers into the L fund.
It's insane.
And there's 74% of it.
Yeah, is
in fixed income.
It is unbelievable. And I say poorly managed in more than just one way. And then even when you're in the accumulation phase, is most of the money's in the C fund, which is the large company stock fund, and it's not really well diversified, even if you're younger.
Well, right, and the problem with the thrift savings is that it only has three true
Three
asset classes for stock.
Yeah, large international, large U.S., and small U.S.
Right.
That's it.
And they have very, very little in international, even in like the 20, 30, or 40, or 50, or 60 now. And it's just terrible of how they do it.
And you can choose the outside funds. There's a way that you can choose outside funds other than their C fund, S fund, and the I fund. But, the interesting thing is that if you look at the expenses when it gets to those, looking at those, you can only put it's like, I think it's 25% of your portfolio in those outside funds, other than the regular target funds and the C, S, and I funds that they have in. But, the thing that's really, it's the ongoing expenses. And every time you do a trade, if you're managing the portfolio and rebalancing, you get hit with a fee every single time. So for those of you that know that there are other alternatives you can go with, they're just not great alternatives. But it doesn't mean we don't tell people, take advantage of it, do it. Put money in while you're putting money away. But it's not where I'd want to be in retirement.
Right. Well, again, and I do the same thing. I tell, whether it's a 401k at work or a simple IRA at work, it's like, it's the easiest way to start, saving and planning for retirement.
Right.
Because if you don't see that money in your check,
built-in discipline.
You don't feel it's my money.
Right.
So, and you learn to live without it. Where it's a lot harder, I have found in working with people, it's a lot harder when you're saying, well, I'll just get my money and I'll set up an automatic, or I'll just send you money on a monthly basis.
Right.
And then the market drops, so you skip a month, or
so there may be
an emergency comes up and you skip a month.
Yeah.
So having the money come out of your check automatically to put into the retirement plan, plus the fact that with the Thrift Savings Plan or the 401k or simple IRA, you could put a lot more money away, whether it be tax deferred or after tax in the Roth side of it, than you can if you're going to use an IRA.